All right. I don't think I've shaved since like the start of this challenge. Yeah, so it's been like 2 more days, I think, and it's been snowing like crazy here. So I haven't been able to paint or do anything related to that like I wanted to. But I spent like the last maybe 3, 4, 5 days teaching myself as much as I can about the pieces related to the electrical engineering side that I don't know. Probably about like 70 hours worth of just nonstop like notes, videos, reading, blah blah blah, and I feel very comfortable. I think at this point with what I know, and in regards to how all of the systems in this is going to work and whatnot. Um, it's super messy in here right now. I've just been taking everything apart. So I ripped apart pretty much everything inside of the scooters. It's a mess right now, but it'll go back together real easy. I started taking apart the Chinese motor controllers on these just to get a better idea of what's going on and to see sort of what we need to do. I have some just random boxes thrown around right now for different parts and things that were needed related to testing and figuring out how this works. Ironically, this is a battery pack for one of these things. This is 12 amp hours, so it's a little small compared to what you could put in this and compared to what we will put in these, but it works. Yeah, pretty much all the wires are apart right now. I've been working on over here using the particle electron and getting everything, writing the firmware for our electrons and just getting them working with switching 60 volts from 3 volts using MOSFETs and transistors and just a little bit of everything. I had a friend who's been helping me along the way who's way more skilled in this field than I am, but it's nice to be able to understand and follow along with what's going on and make suggestions here and there based on the bit of knowledge I now have. But yeah, so we're going along, things are getting tested, things are working. Although one of the things that's not working is this is just an off-the-shelf GPS board from Particle, and it is unable to get a fix on any satellites. Like when I read, if you know anything about that, there's a thing called MEA data. I don't know if there's like a way to pronounce it, but yeah, it's not showing any fixes on any satellites. I think one of the switches inside for the antenna may be broken. I've read that's a common problem with these. Although not super common, but I think I may have been unlucky enough to get a board that had that problem, but it's okay. They're going to send another. There's so much snow. It's crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. I think in just like the last 2, 3 days, we've gotten maybe in total like 8 inches. Farther south from where like I live right now, where I used to live farther south, they're getting like I think a foot, or there's like a foot on the ground there, but I think it's all starting to melt. It's raining a little bit, so hopefully it turns into like slush and just washes away sooner or later. So I think right now this board is basically it's pretty straightforward. The rest of the functionality we need is going to be fairly easy, I think, to add in. Right now this can switch the 60 volt on switch on the motor controllers, so we can turn them on over the air. It can also read the battery voltage off of the 60 volt batteries and determine what percentage the battery is at. The next thing I want to do is the throttle on these is basically a spring-loaded potentiometer, so I'll end up going ahead and writing a way to translate throttle input to something that we can define as a more smooth curve for how the scooter reacts with throttle input. So we'll basically be able to tune the throttle response, which will be really cool. That means we can do things like, for users who are new riding the first time, we can limit like the overall top end of the torque curve of these scooters so they don't hurt themselves, so they get comfortable riding. We can do things like limiting top speed. We can switch the curves to be more aggressive if we want to offer like gimmick modes, like I was saying, like an insane mode or whatnot. And all that's really going to be is just a single dimension map of getting what percentage the throttle is currently at and mapping it to a different output value using we'll use 3.3 volt pulse width modulation from the electron, and probably use something like a MOSFET and another transistor. and be able to output that signal to the motor controller's throttle input, which is over there. And I think that'll get the job done. It should be fairly straightforward, and that'll give us a lot of fun tunability we can do. The other thing I have over here in just this random assortment parts is there's a piezo buzzer somewhere. So we'll be able to, I'll probably wire one of these in. We'll probably use a much heavier duty one that runs on 60 volts or something in the end, but just so it's louder. I'll probably wire one of these in so we can control the sound from them, whether it be, you know, like making a horn or making some little simple melody like when the scooter unlocks instead of just beeping, or something cool like that. It's pretty easy to do, and we need control over the horn anyways. The other final part of that is going to be switching the headlight from on or off from the microcontroller, the Electron. Shouldn't be too hard either. I think what we'll probably end up doing, I debated using like it's like a light sensor on the board, but that's a little too rigid and it wouldn't let us play with it or tune it later from the microcontroller. And because we can update the firmware on these over the air, the more flexibility we can have in the software, the better. And the less we offload, I think, onto the hardware side where we won't be able to mess with it once there's many of these scooters out in the open. That's not ideal. So I think what's going to happen is we'll probably have just some way to toggle the headlight when these are on based on, maybe we'll do it based on time or whatnot. The server will send, you know, something to the scooter saying, hey, like it's past 5 o'clock, turn the headlight on, or hey, it's like past 6 a.m., turn the headlight off. So we'll see what happens there. All right, so you can see a little bit of what I was doing the last hour. This is the motor controller for the brushless DC motor that runs on this thing. It's rated up to about 1,000 watts. The ones we'll have on these, when we release them, will be 1,500 watts. They'll make them pretty powerful, but the main reason, I think I had said it about in the past, is we want a more powerful motor just for the sake of hill climbing, and you get the benefits of them being faster too, which is a fun part, but we'll have to control that anyway. So anyways, I went through all of the wires on this motor controller because I was sort of dumb when I took it apart, but you know, everyone makes mistakes, including me. I'm no different. I went through everything and I took it apart. I didn't take enough pictures to be able to reference how things went back together. And then I didn't get it on camera, but I caused a little bit of a fire in my apartment. And that was just the result of crossing two wires. And there was really only one way I could have possibly caused that, and I happened to plug things back in the way that it caused that. But this was before I really went through and understood how this thing works. But now I know what happened and I know what went wrong. But so anyways, it's pretty cool. This thing's pretty straightforward. It's got a few functions built into it. These boards specifically, they're very, 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 very common boards. I think that they use these primarily in not just these style of scooters, but in China, the bikes they produce as well, the electric bikes, the weird, like, different style electric scooters that aren't this style. Pretty much anything electric that has some sort of brushless DC motor, whether it be, you know, 24 volt, 46 volt, or 60 volt, I believe they all run off these. And if you really dig in and look at the board and you like look at the different pins and whatnot, you'll see, 48 volt, not 46. You'll see that there's a lot of unused pins, and I think what they're doing is, you know, there's many manufacturers printing some schematic for this board and just using the functionality off it they need, which is cool. It makes it easy and makes them cheap for us to get in. Yeah, this doesn't look very good. If you can kind of see, it's a little melty, a little charry, got a little hot. So I had accidentally, when I plugged this thing back in, I had plugged a ground. It was, I believe, this wire. So you can see this black went into what was for the horn switch on this connector, which is switch 60 volts. But where this horn switch ran for the high side to get the 60 volts to run over the switch, it also had the one of the connections from the ignition switch going to it. So I basically ran 60 volts straight to ground, no resistor, no nothing, and it caused a nice little fiery mess. Things were smoking. There was actual fire. There were lots of sparks. It was
It would have been really nice to film for you guys, but yeah, like I said, so this thing's toast. This was basically, this is the keyed switch, which obviously you don't need. We're going to be controlling these with the microcontroller we have, and also sort of a bummer, the board that was in the head unit on these scooters that had the LEDs for the headlight and also the piezo, I think this is piezo buzzer, or it might be like a wafer buzzer, I forget what these are called, but yeah, it has this buzzer for the horn as well, so not super critical to get the first one out, but you know, we'll have the functionality of a headlight and buzzer and future ones, but you know, this is what happens when you start prototyping and figuring stuff out. You melt things, if you're me. What I've really wanted to do, but I haven't been able to because the weather hasn't really permitted, is that it'd be nice to finally tear this thing down. I'm going to tear, you know, like the wheels off and just get it down to a frame, clean all the gunky glue stuff you can see on it off, clean it out, paint it white, get our red branding on our fenders, and put this thing back together with our board that's pretty much more or less prototyped, and get everything back in it. And at that point we can pretty much just plug it in, get the app going, and put this thing out on the street.
I think there's still some firmware stuff on the hardware side I have to figure out. So with Particle, the platform we're using to control these things, which I think a lot of IoT transport companies in the scooter and e-bike space use as well, and it makes a lot of sense after getting familiar with their platform. They have some awesome functionality that's going to save us a lot of time, like being able to trigger functionality on the Electron boards we're using over the air from our API, and having webhooks, being able to get information when things are happening back to our backend without having to long pull or have the Electrons make HTTP posts requests directly to our backend. Everything's managed. Their libraries manage data usage and overhead very well from what I've played with. So yeah, it's surprisingly saved a ton of time, and it's more or less just packaging everything up and putting a bow on it now, and then waiting for, oh, that's another cool thing, is that it's finally, I'm pretty sure today or yesterday was the last day of holiday in China. So I can finally start talking with and finalizing our first shipment of our fleets of scooters, of these particular scooters, with manufacturers, and start getting things together and logistics figured out for producing these things quickly and pushing them out in the city here locally. So yeah, it's cool. It's been a pretty fun project so far. It's a lot of different disciplines, having to learn something new, being a little in a not super comfortable space because I'm not, you know, the electrical engineering and hardware is not something I was super confident and familiar with, but it's definitely been something I've grown with a ton, I think, in the last week, and I'm really excited about it. It's a lot of fun too, just working with something tangible and physical with your hands, but I'm rambling a lot. I want to give you guys a video update and let you know sort of where things are going. As soon as the snow stops, we're really going to be able to move and actually get this thing out here, or out in the wild. But until then, I'm going to just keep posting videos, let you know as soon as like the hardware and the software and everything is all tied together. And yeah, so like, subscribe to the channel if you want to stay and follow any updates as I post them. I'm trying to post a couple videos a week. So yeah, and I think the cutoff is still June 1st for the challenge, and we're almost mid-February, so I think we're making pretty good time.